There's a quiet myth about getting older that a lot of people carry without ever questioning it. The idea that once you pass 60, your memory just fades on a fixed schedule, like a clock slowly winding down. But when researchers look closely at people who reach 100 and stay mentally clear, that story starts to fall apart. Many of them can still follow a long conversation, tell a detailed story without losing the thread, and run their own day without much help. Not all of them. And not without some change along the way. But enough of them to make scientists ask a simple question. What are these people doing year after year that seems to protect the aging brain? The answer isn't one magic thing, it's a handful of very ordinary habits. Before we get into the list, it's worth being honest about what we can and can't say here. Living to 100 with a sharp mind is rare, and the people who do it are not a random sample of humanity. They're survivors. Some had helpful genes, some had steady incomes, safe neighborhoods, and decent access to doctors. So when we notice that they tend to share certain habits, we're looking at a pattern, not a recipe. Nobody can promise you that copying these behaviors will keep your memory intact. What we can say is that the same habits keep showing up across different long-lived groups. And many of them line up with what controlled research already tells us about brain health. That distinction matters because the stakes here are real. Most of us aren't only afraid of dying, we're afraid of outliving our own minds, of forgetting names, missing appointments, losing the thread of who we are. There's a specific kind of fear that shows up around 60 when the small slips start. You walk into a room and forget why. A word sits on the tip of your tongue and won't come. And a quiet voice asks, "Is this the beginning of something?" For most people, it isn't. But the fear is understandable. And it's exactly why this topic gets flooded with bad advice, false promises, and expensive products that don't do much. And here's the part that often gets missed. Staying sharp isn't only about the brain sitting inside your skull. It's tied to your heart, your ears, your sleep, your friendships, and how much your days actually ask of you. The brain doesn't age in isolation. It ages along with the whole life around it. A heart that pumps poorly starves it. Ears that stop working cut off its supply of conversation. A calendar with nothing on it lets it drift. So the habits that seem to protect it aren't brain tricks. They're life patterns. And that's good news because life patterns are things you can actually change. Let's walk through 7 of them. Number 1, they keep moving and they almost never fully stop. Picture a woman in her late 90s who still shuffles out to her garden every morning, bends to pull a few weeds, carries a small watering can back and forth. She wouldn't call it exercise. To her, it's just the day. But that steady, low-level movement may be doing more for her mind than any crossword puzzle. Physical activity is one of the most consistent things researchers find linked with better cognitive aging. When you move, blood flow to the brain increases, delivering more oxygen and fuel to the tissue that needs it most. Movement also seems to support the health of the connections between brain cells, and some research points to physical activity encouraging the brain's own maintenance and growth processes. Long-lived people rarely train like athletes. In fact, most have never set foot in a gym. Instead, movement is woven into the ordinary shape of their day. They walk to the market instead of driving. They climb their own stairs, they garden, they cook, they carry things, they stand up and sit down dozens of times a day without thinking about it. The movement is invisible to them because it's not a workout. It's just how life gets done. Now, this is association, not proof that walking alone keeps dementia away. Active people tend to differ from inactive people in 100 other ways too. But the relationship is strong enough and consistent enough across many studies that few researchers are willing to ignore it. The lesson here isn't to run marathons or chase step counts. It's simpler than that. Never let your body settle into stillness for too long because stillness seems to be what the aging brain likes least. Number 2, they stay connected to other people. Loneliness sounds like an emotional problem, But for the aging brain, it may act more like a physical one. People who reach very old age with clear minds tend to be embedded in a web of regular human contact. A neighbor who stops by, grandchildren who visit, a market where the vendors know their name, a card game every week with the same familiar faces. This constant low-key social activity keeps the brain busy in a way that's genuinely hard to replicate alone. Think about what a simple conversation actually demands. You have to read faces, catch tone, track where the exchange is going, remember what the person told you last time, come up with your own response, and do it all in real time. That's an enormous mental workout, and it happens without any effort. That feels like effort. Researchers have found that social isolation is linked with faster cognitive decline and higher dementia risk. And in the major reviews of things we might be able to change, isolation is now treated as one of the factors worth paying attention to. There may be a stress angle too. Loneliness tends to raise the body's stress load, and chronic stress isn't kind to the brain over decades. Of course, we can't fully untangle cause from effect here. Maybe healthier brains find it easier to stay social in the first place. But the connection shows up too often, in too many places, to wave away. And unlike a supplement, staying connected costs nothing but your attention. Number 3, they protect their hearing. This one surprises almost everyone. What do your ears have to do with your memory? A lot, it turns out. In recent years, hearing loss in midlife and later has been identified as one of the larger modifiable risk factors linked to dementia. And here's the simple idea behind it. When your hearing fades, two things happen. Your brain has to work harder just to make out words, pulling resources away from memory and thinking. And you slowly start pulling back from conversations, from noisy dinners, from the social world, because straining to hear is exhausting. That withdrawal feeds right back into isolation, the very thing we just talked about. People who stay mentally sharp tend to keep engaging with the world of sound, and many who need help with their hearing get it, rather than quietly retreating into silence. This is one of the more hopeful items on the list, because hearing is something that can often be helped. Where hearing loss used to be treated as an inevitable, harmless part of aging, we now understand it as a link in a chain that can quietly pull the mind down over time. Now, to be clear, treating hearing loss isn't a proven cure for anything, and research is still working out how much difference it makes for the brain. But protecting one of your main links to other people and to daily conversation is a reasonable, low-risk thing to take seriously. If sound has started slipping away from you, that's worth a check, not a shrug. Number 4, they keep learning, even in small ways. There's a comforting phrase you've probably heard: use it or lose it. It's a little too simple, but there's a real idea underneath it. The brain seems to benefit from being challenged, from having to build new patterns rather than only running old ones. And the people who age well cognitively rarely coast mentally. This doesn't mean they're all doing calculus at 90. One might be learning new songs. Another keeps up a lifelong habit of reading. Someone else takes up a new craft, learns to use a phone to video call family, or teaches a grandchild a skill from their trade. What seems to matter is novelty and a bit of difficulty, something that makes the brain reach. Researchers describe this loosely as building cognitive reserve, a kind of mental buffer that may help the brain keep functioning well even as physical changes accumulate underneath. The idea is that a well-used brain has more spare capacity to fall back on. Two people can have similar amounts of age-related change in their brains, yet one stays sharp and the other struggles. And reserve is one of the leading explanations for that gap. The evidence here is mixed on any single activity, though, so be skeptical of brain training apps that promise to make you smarter. Getting good at a game usually just makes you good at that game. It doesn't reliably spill over into everyday memory. What seems to hold up is the broader pattern: staying curious, reaching for things that are a little hard, refusing to let your mental world shrink down to the same few routines year after year. Number 5. They guard their sleep. For a long time, sleep was treated as the brain switching off. We now understand it's closer to the brain doing maintenance. During deep sleep, the brain appears to clear out waste products that build up during waking hours, including some tied to aging and brain disease. People who reach old age in good shape often have surprisingly steady sleep patterns. They tend to keep regular hours, get natural light during the day, and wind down as it gets dark. Their sleep isn't perfect. Aging changes sleep for almost everyone, but the rhythm tends to stay intact. Now here's the honest caveat. Poor sleep and cognitive decline are tangled together, and the arrow points both ways. Bad sleep may harm the brain, and a declining brain may wreck sleep. So we can't call good sleep a simple shield. But given how much the brain seems to rely on it for repair, protecting your sleep is one of the safest bets on this entire list. Number 6, they take care of their heart and their blood vessels. Here's a truth that doesn't get enough attention. What's good for your heart is usually good for your brain. Your brain is an incredibly hungry organ fed by a dense network of tiny blood vessels. When those vessels are damaged over years by high blood pressure, high blood sugar, or smoking, the brain suffers quietly alongside the heart. A lot of what we casually call memory loss in older age has a vascular component, meaning it's tied to blood flow, not only to the classic image of brain plaques. People who stay sharp into their 90s and beyond, often though not always, have reasonably well-managed blood pressure and stable metabolic health, sometimes through lifestyle, sometimes through medical care. This is one area where the science is fairly strong. Managing blood pressure in midlife is one of the better supported ways to lower later dementia risk. If you have high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart concerns, this is a conversation to have with a qualified clinician because the right approach depends on your situation. Number 7, they hold on to a reason to get up. This last one is harder to measure, but it keeps appearing. People who live very long, clear lives tend to have something that pulls them forward, a purpose. It doesn't have to be grand. It might be tending a garden, caring for a spouse, showing up at a community group, keeping a small business alive, or simply being the person the family relies on. Researchers have found that a stronger sense of purpose in life is associated with slower cognitive decline and lower risk of impairment. Why might that be? Part of it may be direct, through stress and mood and the body's chemistry. But a lot of it is probably indirect, because purpose tends to pull the other 6 habits along with it. If you have a reason to leave the house, you move more, you see people. You use your mind, you keep regular hours because something depends on you being there. In that sense, purpose isn't really a separate item at all. It's the engine underneath the others. It's the answer to the question, why bother? And people who keep answering that question well into old age tend to keep living in the ways that seem to protect the mind. We can't prove that meaning itself protects neurons. That's not something a study can cleanly test. But a life with direction tends to be a life that keeps the brain engaged, and that is very much not a small thing. So step back and look at these 7 together because the connections between them matter more than any single item. Notice what's missing from this list. There's no exotic supplement, no superfood, no secret from a remote village that you have to buy in powder form. Instead, the pattern is almost boringly practical. Move your body, stay close to people, keep hearing them. Keep learning, sleep well, protect your heart, hold on to a reason to keep going. And here's the thing that becomes obvious once you lay them side by side. They're not 7 separate habits at all. They lean on each other. Purpose gets you out of the chair. Getting out of the chair puts you around people. Being around people keeps your mind working and your hearing engaged. Good heart health keeps your energy up for all of it. Good sleep lets you show up the next day. It's a loop, and each piece feeds the others. That's probably why no single habit ever explains a 100-year-old mind. It's the whole system, running quietly for decades. That seems to do the work. Now, let's be careful about what the science actually supports, because this is where a lot of longevity content goes off the rails. Some of these 7 rest on stronger evidence than others. Managing blood pressure and cardiovascular health has some of the best support, including from controlled trials, not just observation. Physical activity has a large and consistent body of research behind it, though a lot of it is observational, meaning it shows a relationship without fully proving cause. Social connection, hearing, sleep, learning, and purpose are mostly supported by observational studies. These are studies that watch large groups of people over time and look for patterns. They're valuable, but they have a built-in problem. They can't easily separate the habit from everything else about a person's life. Healthier people may simply be more social, more active, and more purposeful to begin with. That's called reverse causation, and it haunts this entire field. On top of that, studying people who live to 100 is genuinely hard. There aren't many of them. Their memories of their own past habits may be unreliable, and the ones who volunteer for studies may not represent everyone. So when you hear a confident claim that some habit adds years to your brain, be a little skeptical. The truth is more modest and honestly more useful. These are strong, repeated patterns that point in a consistent direction, backed in places by solid trials. That's a good reason to take them seriously. It's not a guarantee, And anyone who offers you a guarantee about the aging brain is selling something. While we're being honest, let's clear up what most people get wrong about all this. The first mistake is looking for the single trick. People want the one food, the one supplement, the one exercise. But nothing on this list works in isolation, and chasing one item while ignoring the rest tends to disappoint. The second mistake is starting with supplements before fixing the basics. It's far easier to swallow a pill than to rebuild your sleep, your friendships, or your activity level. But the pill is where the evidence is weakest, and the basics are where it's strongest. The third mistake is assuming it's too late. A lot of people over 60 quietly decide the damage is done. Yet many of these habits show benefits even when started later in life. The brain stays more adaptable than we used to believe. And the fourth mistake is treating memory slips as proof of disease. Everyone forgets names and misplaces keys. Normal cognitive aging is not the same as dementia, and turning every lapse into a crisis only adds stress, which helps nothing. If you're genuinely worried about your memory, that's a reason to see a doctor, not a reason to panic. So, what's the real picture here once you strip away the hype? The people who reach 100 with their minds intact didn't find a shortcut. There was no single morning they woke up and decided to protect their brain. Most of them spent decades living in a way that kept their bodies moving, their relationships close, their days meaningful, and their health reasonably tended. The sharp mind at the end wasn't the goal they were chasing. It was more like a side effect of a life built on movement, connection, and purpose. And that reframes the whole question in a helpful way. The point isn't really to obsess over hitting 100. Most of us won't, and honestly, chasing a specific number misses what matters. The point is that these same habits are exactly what keep a person independent, engaged, and clear-headed at 70, at 80, at 90. They're about the quality of the years, not just the raw count of them. Think about what independence really means at that age. Being able to manage your own money, to follow the plot of a movie with your family, to recognize a grandchild's face and remember their name, to make your own decisions about your own life. That's the real prize here. And it's a far more reachable one than immortality ever was. If there's a single thing to take from all of this, it's this. The habits that seem to protect the aging mind are not strange, expensive, or hidden. They're the ordinary architecture of an engaged life. Keep moving. Stay close to people. Keep listening and learning. Sleep and protect your heart. Hold on to something that gets you up in the morning. None of it guarantees anything, because nothing can. But taken together over years, these patterns give the aging brain its best available support. Centenarians didn't crack a secret code. They just kept living in ways that asked their minds to stay awake. Longevity may be the headline, but a mind that stays with you to the end, that's the story worth caring about. If this helped you think about aging a little more clearly, you can like the video and subscribe to The 100-Year Life for more evidence-based stories about living longer, stronger, and better.